Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to peel back the layers on one of the most iconic faces in history to find the man behind the myth. So here's the big question we're tackling. How in the world does an asthmatic, middle-class doctor from Argentina become this global symbol of armed revolution? It's an incredible story, and believe it or not, it all starts with a motorcycle.
Okay, so to really get this, you've got to understand the two sides of this person. On one hand, you have Ernesto Guevara, the doctor, the traveler, the son. And on the other, you have Che, the comandante, the Marxist, the guerrilla fighter. Our goal here is to figure out how one became the other.
All right, Section 1, A Rebel Awakens. And like I said, this whole thing kicks off not with a gun, but with a motorcycle, and a journey that completely reshaped his entire view of the world.
So in 1951, he takes off on this epic motorcycle trip. And this wasn't just some joyride. His travels across South America, man, they were a raw, unfiltered education that no medical school could ever provide. He saw firsthand the deep, grinding poverty and injustice, and it completely changed him.
And this trip, it wasn't just about the miles he covered. It was an ideological transformation. I mean, think about this. At the San Pablo Leprosarium, he refused to wear rubber gloves. He ate with the patients. He lived with them. He even swam across a tributary of the Amazon River just to hang out with them on his birthday. Experiences like that, they started forging a really radical new perspective.
He started seeing the world in these really stark terms, a struggle between the oppressed and the powerful. And you can see it in his own words from 1953, where he's talking about how the so-called good people just don't get it. This view was sharpened to a razor's edge when he was in Guatemala and witnessed a CIA-backed coup overthrow a democratically elected government. For him, that was the last straw.
Section 2, Forged in Revolution. So, with these new, hardened convictions, he ends up in Mexico, and that's where he runs into a group of Cuban exiles and their young, really charismatic leader, a guy named Fidel Castro.
Okay, so in the mountains of Cuba, this is where the doctor really gets forged into a commander. He joins the expedition as the troop medic, right? But he quickly proves he's more than that. He's a natural fighter, a brilliant strategist. His own comrades saw it, and Fidel Castro definitely saw it, promoting him to comandante.
But with that new rank came a really serious reputation for ruthlessness. Che fully embraced a pragmatic and often pretty brutal approach to this revolutionary war. In his mind, the survival of the cause depended on absolute iron discipline, and he was more than willing to be the one to enforce it, even overseeing executions of suspected traitors himself. And just listen to his own words from a letter he wrote to his mother. He says, "I am not moderate. I shall try not ever to be." This shows a man who has completely rejected the middle ground. He wasn't just fighting a war. He was consumed by what he called a sacred flame. There was just no room for compromise anymore.
All right, on to Section 3, Building the New Man. So the revolution wins in 1959, and suddenly the guerrilla fighter has to become a state builder. Che takes on this massive challenge of trying to create a whole new Cuba from the ground up.
And I mean, look at the jobs he took on. He was the supreme prosecutor at a fortress prison, the president of the National Bank, head of industrialization, minister of industries, the list goes on. He was right at the center of power, overseeing everything from revolutionary tribunals to the entire nation's economy. But his real goal, his ultimate goal, was ideological. He wanted to create what he called the new man. The idea was to build a new kind of citizen, someone motivated by morality and the collective good, not by selfish individualism or, greed. This was his big vision, not just for Cuba, but for the whole world.
Okay, Section 4, the global campaign. See, for Che, the Cuban Revolution, that was just the beginning. It was just the first domino to fall in a worldwide struggle against imperialism. A desk job, no matter how powerful, was never, ever going to be enough for him.
So, convinced that this revolution had to be exported, in 1965, he just vanishes from public life in Cuba. He gives up all his powerful posts, says goodbye to his family, and goes totally undercover to lead a Cuban brigade in the Congo. His new mission? To ignite that revolutionary fire in Africa.
But the Congo campaign was a total disaster. I mean, the goal was huge, right? Spark a continental revolution. But the reality on the ground was just awful. There was almost no cooperation from the local rebels he was supposed to be helping. The whole thing was plagued by infighting and incompetence, and it just completely fell apart.
And that failure in the Congo, It was a devastating blow for him, both personally and ideologically. His own diary from that time shows a man just filled with regret, blaming himself for the deaths of his comrades. He and his surviving men had to flee in total secrecy.
Section 5. The End of the Road. You'd think that failure would stop him, but no. Undeterred, and maybe even more driven by what happened in Africa, Che geared up for one last, desperate attempt to create what he called 2-3 Many Vietnams, this time in the heart of Latin America.
His final campaign in the mountains of Bolivia, though, was pretty much doomed from the start. He arrives in disguise in late '66. By early '67, the fighting starts, but he just can't win over the local peasants for support. His small guerrilla unit gets ambushed and decimated, and then, on October 8, 1967, he's wounded and captured by Bolivian rangers who were being trained and aided by the CIA. The very next day, he was executed.
So, after his capture, Che was executed without a trial. His body was then flown to a nearby town and displayed to the press before being buried in a secret mass grave. The life of Ernesto Guevara, the man, was over. But those images of his body, they gave birth to a global myth that would far, far outlive him.
It's almost like he saw it coming. In his final published message, which came out just months before his death, he pretty much anticipates his own martyrdom. He frames his death not as a failure, but as a battle cry that he hopes will reach a receptive ear and inspire others to pick up the weapon. It's an incredible piece of writing.
And after all of that, the motorcycle journey, the Cuban Revolution, the campaigns in Africa and South America, his story was over. He was just 39 years old. Which brings us to the ultimate question, right? His actual revolutions in Congo and Bolivia, they failed. But his image, that image endures. Why is that? From doctor to comandante, from revolutionary to icon, the story of Che Guevara is still this powerful and yet deeply controversial testament to the sheer force of conviction. For better or for worse, the man who set out to change the world ended up creating an image that never really left it.